to Let's Talk to Animals. I'm your host, Shannon Cutts, along with my ever-present feathered sidekick, Pearl Cutts, my 22-year-old soul bird who never misses an episode. We are so excited to have Rose Proud with us today. We are going to talk about all things animal communication. If you are listening or watching today, because we have a podcast and a YouTube series, and you have ever had the thought, even the stray thought cross your mind, is it even possible? Like, is talking to animals a thing? Well, as a matter of fact, it is. And we are delighted to introduce you, give you a little overview today. Okay, he's got his banana pacifier over here where he likes to chew on it and he wants to go. Do you want to go back? So clearly talking to animals is a thing. And even if you're a professional, it certainly can be challenging with your own animals. But for our purposes here today, I'll never forget the first time that I communicated with an animal. It was so natural. I mean, I thought to my very first thought, it was an iguana. I'll never forget this. And my very first thought after I had our little conversation during my training was, everyone can do this. Mm-hmm. It's part of our birthright. It's not something that's reserved, come here, for special people or special beings. It's something that we all it's like a software that comes pre-installed. It's just that, unlike with our spoken language of choice, and in our case, English, we don't get any training. Nobody puts that on our required curriculum in school. How to use, how to speak, how to listen, how to understand and communicate using the universal language of all species. And so this is one of the primary driving forces behind why I wanted to do this podcast and this YouTube series, Let's Talk to Animals, is because, I'm 50 and I just found out this year that this was a thing that I too can do. And so for those of you who may run across this series and be wondering if it's something that you can do with your own animals or with wildlife you care about, or with marine life, or even trees or insects or flowers, you can. And so Rose and I are going to chat about that today. We're going to talk about what it's like, what to expect, how to know you're doing it, and how to get started. And at the end, we'll share some resources for you if you want to reach out to Rose directly. So Rose, thank you so much for being a part of today's and being our special guest on today's podcast and YouTube series. I'm so delighted to have you in your fairy office on our show today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So the very first thing I always like to say, just in case I forget, is roseproud.com. If you want to connect with Rose, just to make sure at the end I don't do a nice, neat little wrap up and forget, roseproud.com, PROUD. That's how to get in touch with her. And of course, you can get in touch with me at animallovelanguages.com. I know we never miss an episode, and we almost never miss a chance to add our 2 cents. So our very first question today is, when did you know that talking with animals was even possible?
Well, I knew when I was a child, but I forgot. So you kind of forget about it, right? So when I was reminded, I had this dog named Benny that we adopted. He was an older dog, and we were in the car on a trip. I had a little minivan, and we're driving along, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm thirsty. I thought, I'm not thirsty. Where'd that come from? And I looked, and Benny had come up between the seats and was sitting right there just staring at me. And as soon as I looked at him, I was like, oh, you're thirsty. So I looked at my son and said, give Benny his water. He's thirsty. He's like, how do you know? I said, he just told me. He's like, all right, Mom. I mean, he grew up with me being, weird anyway, so it wasn't totally unexpected from me to him. And then after that, a few things, it was like he opened up that door again. And I just had more curiosity about it. I started thinking about it. I remembered this cat that I had when I was 10, who I was extremely bonded to. And I always felt like I knew what she wanted. And I would tell my mom, Snowball says she wants blah, blah, blah. And my mom would say, how do you know? I said, she told me. I just accepted it. So after Benny passed away, we only had him about 2 years. Kept feeling him around me. And as you know, animals will often come in and hold space with us in spirit after they make their transition. But I didn't really know that. And I was worried he was stuck. And about that time, I saw a class advertised for animal communication. And that's when I started on my journey. So I took the class, I talked to Benny, I talked to some of my other animals, and that was about 20 years ago.
Wow. Time
Yeah.
flies, huh?
It
Yeah.
does.
So
Yeah.
often people do come to this journey, this work, if you will, through an animal that is transitioning or has passed. And it's either that grief that opens us up. It's that longing to reconnect. And it almost feels like it's that deep inner knowing beyond the level of the mind that might be possible.
Right.
Where does that idea even come from? Oh, I think I'll go online. So many of my fellow animal communication students, when I was studying, said they found out about it in a similar fashion and decided to head to the repository of all knowledge, the internet, and take a look and see, is it possible to talk to my pet after they passed? And that's how many people discover animal communication, and that it's a thing and that it's possible and it's something that we can study. So, as I shared in the intro, for me, my first practice ever talking to an animal, it was like a part of me started to wake up that, like you shared, you had known about it in childhood and then you forgot. And it's like this part of me started to wake up again, but also for the first time. It's like, wait, there's more to me. I didn't know this. So those of you who are listening or watching and you subscribe to There's Always More to Learn about being a human being, life lessons journey, you will love it. I promise. It's a really cool thing. Speaking of which, for those who may be tuning in who have never had that experience, Rose, what is it like for you when you talk to animals? What does it feel like, sound like? What is the experience like for you?
So when I connect with an animal, it first comes in as sensation for me. And that's my way of connecting. I'm also very clairaudient. So I like to have the person say their name and say their animal's name. That's just another, I call it another energy channel to connect with, and also where I can see their face, the animal's face. But when I first tune in, it comes in, I usually feel it in my heart center. And I just get a sense of connection with the animal I'm working with. Often personality traits come through usually right away. And I like to start with that too, just so the people know I have the right energy. And sometimes my body will move. You might have had that experience. Like if you get someone who's really sassy, I'll be sitting there, I'll relax, and I'm like, because their energy just comes in so strongly, and I'm like all sassy too. So I start with questions, and when I hear them, I always tell people it's more like my voice. It's not like I hear some little voice going, "What do you do?" And it's my voice, but they can communicate in words, but I'm feeling most of it. And sometimes the feeling comes in so strongly, so clearly, it's almost like the words come with it. Sometimes I sit with the energy for a moment because I'm understanding what I'm feeling, but I want to pick the best words to accurately represent them to their people so that I'm saying it the right way and not being a really important message that they're trying to share by using, the wrong word. So kind of varies with each session and each animal. And I also get feeling in my body. If I'm working on a physical issue, I feel what they feel. So I can describe any level of pain or discomfort or if they're feeling nauseous, that type of thing. And then so often that helps them when they're, trying to help them feel better, or their vet's having a hard time diagnosing. So, but I would say the majority for me is all sensation. And the more I did it, then I started getting more audio, and I get pictures. They'll send pictures, so I see things that they want to show me. They might show me a favorite toy or something in the house, or if you're working with a lost animal, I ask them to show me what they can see so they can be located. But so it's all those things, but sensation is really for me, that's the main energy.
It's really interesting because, as you bring up, there are many different ways that we can communicate with one another. This is something that frequently is challenging for someone who's brand new on the journey to animal communication, because it's so tempting to look at one of your fellow classmates or an animal communicator who is doing the work that you really admire and think, oh, I wish I could connect the way that they do, or I wish I had this other gift. I've met communicators who will just see kind of a full movie, where all of the different sensory data kind of comes in at once. And then others who primarily receive sensory, or it might just be hearing or seeing, or deep knowings is one of the primary ways that I work. And because it's more subtle, it's taken me some time to understand what's going on. And all of these different channels, and it's about kind of fine-tuning our dial to pick up the messages as they come in, and being familiar with all of these different ways: the seeing, the hearing, the smelling, the touching, the tasting, which can be a really interesting one, right?
Yes.
And the knowings that we get, and some of the physical experiences, like you were sharing, feeling nauseated when an animal is feeling nauseated, or feeling amped up when you're talking with a really energetic or excitable animal, or just feeling really, really tired when you're speaking with an animal that has a low energy level, and learning how to separate you from the experience that the animal is showing you, and kind of starting to decode and trusting that, to be able to stay centered enough in yourself to notice when something shifts, and realize, well, I wasn't feeling exhausted or energetic a moment ago, and I just asked an animal a question.
Right.
Could that possibly be their answer?
Right.
So, we all kind of want and crave at first the really overt communication messages, just so we can be sure that we're really getting it. But it feels like so much of interspecies communication is about helping us to dial into the subtle and the sensory, and looking past the yelling in our mind, and the big, bold technicolor of our modern movies, and noticing the small details that can really make a difference. Does that make sense? I don't know. Did I just go off on a ramble? I don't know, but that's really been a lot about what it's been like for me thus far, is realizing every little detail matters. So I guess the next natural question would be, how has talking with animals, just awakening this gift and this ability within you and honing it, how has it changed your life?
So many ways. I don't even know where to start. But one of the things, animals are such wonderful teachers, especially about unconditional love and being present in the moment. They pull us back into the moment all the time. And unfortunately, sometimes people aren't paying attention, but they realize the importance of not projecting into the future, especially like worry, concern, and not living in the past. It's all about right now, right here. Isn't this grand? So even when they're going through something that we look at as awful, say a
Yeah.
disease or transition, they're still present in the moment. And they have taught me so much about being present with what's right now and not putting worry out there, especially with things like COVID, such a big, it's affected our whole world. To some people, I might seem like I have my head in the sand, but I'm just staying present with the energy of now. And they've also taught me an incredible lesson about death, because they don't look at death like, they know they're just changing form. They get excited. I've been with a lot of animals at the time of transition, and it's like, woohoo, going home. They not that they don't wish sometimes that their time was was still longer with their person, or that they're going to miss us, but they know they can still be with us in spirit. And there's always a welcoming committee. There's other animals or people or both. I mean, to be honest, that was really weird, but I'm kind of looking forward to that day when I make my transition. I'm not like in a hurry for it.
Right.
but,
We get it. We
but
hear
it's
you.
just,
We hear you.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
because it's so incredibly beautiful. It brings tears to my eyes every time I experience that with them, because it's just the energy, the love, the willingness, the acceptance is just incredible. And to be able to do work like this, that I feel is such a privilege. I really do feel privileged to work with people and their animals, and to be a connection for them, and to be able to do this as my job is such,
Yeah. Right.
it's such a blessing. I can't ever complain about it. you know
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important to understand that it can be intense. I mean, we're helping people through transitions, maybe the animals sailing through it because they have a deeper understanding of what one of my animal communication mentors calls, we just change addresses. We're just changing addresses.
Yes.
And animals do have and they have a more immediate acceptance of it, from what I've found thus far, when another animal in the family passes, and the person is struggling to understand, and the animals they've already connected from the other side. I so there is, but it's like, this can be heavy, this can be intense work. The gratitude for me there comes from feeling supported by the animals to hold space for that grieving human, and feeling guided by the animals to provide what that human needs to hear and feel and sense, in order to get their own glimpse of the fact that death is not just, the end with the
Right.
credits rolling. I've had a lot of loss of humans this year. I lost my best friend suddenly, and then I lost my father. And for the first time, I have found myself thinking, maybe I could just take a day trip. Like I wish that it was an address that I could go and visit. And feeling that gratitude, because in both cases there was physical suffering going on, and I know that this person that I loved is no longer experiencing that suffering. And that has really brought up in me how, the grief process, it's like we're grieving for what we've lost, not necessarily for what they've found. It's been a little easier. That didn't quite make sense, did it? We're grieving for what we've lost, and at the same time we're grateful for what they found, which is the relief. I guess that was sometimes only half of what I'm thinking in my head actually comes out my mouth.
I thought it made sense the first way.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that.
It's we remembered what they're receiving, it would help the grief,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
And
with physical, their physical presence.
yeah, it feels like, I there are a few communicators who do specifically work with pets in the afterlife, and there's one who actually hosts a bereavement group for pets, and I think that's really important because there's a lot more resources when you lose a human
Hmm.
than there are when you lose a pet, and there's a lot more understanding of how hard it can be. And so part of this work and part of our mission as communicators, I mean, to help facilitate, to open that door to people that are really grieving, to say, this is love. It doesn't matter what species it is. It's love. When you lose somebody that you love, and you love so unconditionally, and you are loved so unconditionally, this level of pain, I mean, it's kind of shows you what you're made of,
Hmm.
and the depths to which we can love, like our capacity to love and be loved. And animals have such a huge role in stretching us in that particular area. So those of you who may be listening or watching, and who you're helping a pet transition, or you've lost an animal that you really loved, deep, profound respect, um, and honor. And, just don't let anybody even try to diminish your grief. It's a huge, huge, huge thing. And in some ways, I mean, there's been multiple studies that have talked about how kids in particular, when they're suffering, if there's an animal in the family, are much more inclined to go and confide in
Hmm.
their animal than they are in their siblings or their parents. And there was a study, and I want to say it was the Humane Society, but it could be wrong. They asked adults, if you could be stranded on a desert island with only one other person, who would it be? And more than half of them chose their pet over their spouse. Hopefully that survey was anonymous. But mad respect. That's all I have to say. So, if you're still with us, if you're still listening, you're probably wondering if this is something that you can learn to do. What will it take? Is it like signing up for kindergarten, middle school, high school, and college all over again? Is it quicker than that? Rose, could you speak to that? What advice would you have for someone who wants to get started and have an experience of talking to animals?
I mean, there are so many different classes online. There's a number of books. I think it's important that um, people find the teacher that they're led to, someone that they resonate with. And it's different for each person, but it's not really a long process once you open up that channel. I always tell people, I believe, just like you, we all have this ability. Everybody can do what I do. It's just a matter of finding out how you receive information, understanding that that's information coming in. And the hardest part really for most people is trusting it, because the human mind immediately puts in doubt. Like, oh, I probably just made that up. I didn't really feel that or hear that or see that. So practice, 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 practice. The more you do, the confirmation will come, and that'll just help solidify your belief in yourself, because that's the hardest part. And working with people that you don't know, even though that sometimes seems a little scarier, is helpful. You know them and you know the animal, then you're thinking, well, I already knew that. Well, I knew that they like that or whatever. So I think it's always good to take at least a class with someone who is guiding you, because it gets some of that, it kind of forces you into it and gets some of that initial hesitation out of the way. There's, months long classes. There's, weekend seminars, depending on what you want to do with it. And, kind of go from there. My first class was just a weekend class. And I I learned a lot from that. And I didn't go into being a professional animal communicator at that time. My kids were little. I was homeschooling. You know, I was pretty,
You were
that's
busy.
a lot of my life. Yes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until just like 6 years ago that my youngest graduated from homeschool. He was still homeschooled the whole time.
Woo!
And maybe it's 5 years. I don't even know. Time, like, I'm in a time warp.
Yeah.
He
Right.
grad- And I also took care of my mother for the last 5 years of her life, and she passed away at the same year. So then all of a sudden I was like, now what do I want to be when I grow up? And
Right.
so
Right.
I have do energy healing, I do hypnotherapy. So I just kind of put that out to the universe. Where am I best served? How can I serve others best? Where am I best, needed? And I kept getting people in my path with animals, with issues. And I'd say, oh, I do this thing. And I would work with their animals. So I called my mentor, the one who gave me that first class that I took. She's in Boulder, Colorado. Her name's Jolie Wingerson. She's wonderful. And I saw that she now had a 4-month certification course. So I called her up and talked to her about it and decided to enroll. So I did that as well. And that's, what just kind of propelled me into getting a website, putting myself out there. And, it's often hard for people who do spiritual work to take money. I mean, there could be a whole class, like a week-long class on accepting payment for what we do, because it's a spiritual thing. There's some part of us that feels like we shouldn't take money, but if we want to continue our work and be as clear and grounded and centered as possible, we need to be paid for it. So we have to do other stuff that take away our energy. And so, it's a transition into that for me was a little bumpy at first, but it's just wonderful now. And I'm so grateful that I can do something that makes me feel so fulfilled and be able to, provide for myself for what I need. It's incredible. So I don't know if that really answered the question, but there's
It
a lot of
absolutely did. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot, there's the more I reach out with this series, the more I encounter amazing animal communicators who have all kinds of different programs, from, like you said, a weekend workshop to 6, 9, or 12-month certification courses. There are virtual on demand. There are live on Zoom. There are even some that are still starting to open back up to in-person on-site courses. There are courses you can take through institutes like Omega. Many communicators have written books that give you a good introduction. One of the best ways, and it was my formal introduction to animal communication as a thing that is possible, was actually just hiring a communicator to talk with my diverse little interspecies family who didn't always get along. And then, that kind of led to, it was a very positive experience. I got a lot of confirmation that she was talking to my animals, and which is really important. That's, it's a gut level knowing that she's got my animal on the line. That's so him, or that's so her, or whatever's going on, that lets you know. And so that can be a really great entree as well, to just have the experience directly and then decide, and you don't necessarily even have to know. You don't have to go into learning how to communicate with animals because you want to hang out a shingle and decide what your pricing is going to be. There are a lot of students that I've met along the way who they signed up because they had an animal with special needs and they wanted to learn how to care for that animal better, or they had a special heart to work with charities and they wanted to have a different kind of gift that they could offer and volunteer with animals to help them find forever homes. You don't have to have a reason to learn a gift that you were born with. Just the spirit of adventure is and the possibilities is enough. And if you decide along the way, like you did, you take a short course, maybe you read a book, you have an experience like I did with a communicator, and then one thing leads to another, and you just feel like, I'd just like to find out a little bit more. I'd just like to find out a little bit more. So many of the communicators that I'm connecting with have added lots of other things to their toolkit as well. Like you mentioned, hypnotherapy.
Mhm.
And how that wraps in with, for me, I'm a Reiki master, and that is a very useful add-on to provide another dimension with animal communication. And so, if you're meant to do this thing, professionally, if you feel that calling to go public, to tell your friends and family, and or do whatever. I mean, when I told my mother that I was psychic, she just said, "Oh yes, you're very psychic." I was like, I'm not sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but at least it was a confirmation, So, and don't assume that you know how the people in your life are going to respond. They could surprise you. They could say, "Yeah, we know." you know? So just don't put those barriers up in your path, I guess, is the encouragement today. If you're here, we're delighted, and we want to encourage you. The world has lots of animals and needs lots more humans who want to connect with them and care for them and support them and find out what they need and help facilitate a more peaceable kingdom, so to speak, or a more peaceful planet. We really need you. If you're interested, come join us, come have fun, come play, come learn how interspecies communication can work in your life and transform some things that feel stuck for good. So Rose, I guess the last piece that I always like to leave our viewers and listeners with is just a little bit more about how to work with you, how to reach you, how to experience the transformation you can provide between animals and humans. What advice would you give someone who maybe wants to reach out to you, wants to work with you, wants to experience this?
If they go to my website, which you already mentioned, roseproud.com, there is information there. You can book a session. I have online booking. If you want to hear how it sounds to have a session, I've been on a few other podcasts, so you can search for Animal Communicator Rose, and they should pop up. They're also on my website. I think they're all on there. I'm not real good at the tech.
There was newsforthesoul.com radio. I found a number of live readings. So that could be another fun way if you want to go ahead of newsforthesoul.com radio and go head over and find Rose there.
Yeah, I do live every Thursday. Not every Thursday, I'm sorry, the fourth Thursday of every month at 5 p.m. The last night was a radio show. You can call in and, ask questions, and I work with you during the show. So I also offer a one-on-one mentorship program for anyone who's interested in learning animal communication. It's 12 weeks. It's the first part of it is all about intuitive development, working with you to help you discover, how you receive information and learning to trust it. It depends on who it is as to where we start. And that's one of the reasons I like doing one-on-one, because I can tailor it for the person instead of a cookie cutter program, which there's nothing wrong with that either. But this is just, I'm like a go with the flow kind of person. So I like to, work with people where they're at. And so I take a couple students at a time. I try to make sure I have enough time and energy for all my sessions as well. And so if anybody's interested in that, if you contact me either through my website or my email is petmessenger@gmail.com, and I can send you info about it. I don't have it on my website. One of these days I'll get it on there.
Yeah, right.
I'm just so bad.
Doing techie stuff is not as interesting as talking to animals. Let's just be honest, right?
Once a couple sessions trade me for your techie ability, that would be great.
Right.
I'm just I don't like doing that stuff, you know, so I
Yeah.
resist.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally hear you. And that's a really, it's a really good point. I mean, there are lots of ways. So we have lots of different ways that we can get our needs met, lots of different forms of payment. I don't know that we're necessarily still in the era where we, bring in a flank steak in order, or, that's probably not an appropriate analogy for an animal communication show, but maybe like a batch of fresh tomatoes or something, in exchange. But I mean, there are lots of ways. And it's interesting because I think you're the first person that I have interviewed for this series that does do the intensive one-on-one mentoring. And some people, it's really important to think about how you learn best. Do you want that more personalized touch, personalized attention, and really tailored program? Do you just want a broad brush overview? And really consider that there's lots and lots and lots of options. And so if that sounds like something that really works for you, it can be a really powerful way to have that one-to-one attention.
Oops, did I lose you?
Oopsie, I just lost your visual. I did not
There
lose.
we
There
go.
you go. No worries. No worries. You never know what's going to happen on Let's Talk to Animals, right? So, Rose, thank you so much for sharing how to get in touch with you and all the different ways that people can experience animal communication with you. It has been a delight to talk with you today. Thank you so much for donating your time to share information for newbies who might want to give it a try. Come here. Are you nesting? He's nesting. He says, okay. We always like to close out. He's got his cute little, this is his little sidekick. You can see a very pretty cockatiel in this, right? He says, yes, you can, Mom. So Mr. Pearl and I and Miss Rose want to wish you a very wonderful rest of your day or evening whenever you're listening or watching, and we look forward to welcoming you back very soon. roseproud.com is how you can reach Rose, and you can reach Pearl and myself along with Malty, my tortoise, and Bruce, my fox turtle, at animallovelanguages.com. Oh, fox turtles are the best, aren't they? Well, they're the second best, or maybe the third best.
I've had her 30 years.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
She's on my Instagram.
I'll have to go check that out.
Say that Animal Communicator Rose is my
Animal
Facebook.
Communicator Rose. Okay.
But yeah, if you go to Instagram, I'm there with Whitey. That's her name, Whitey, my little turtle. My son was when he named her.
What's your Instagram?
Animal Communicator.
Animal Communicator Rose. Okay. Awesome. Whitey is a great name for a box turtle. It's right. It never worked. All right, my dear one. It's been so lovely sharing time with you. And I will talk to you soon.